Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this week's Tuesday edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show this evening... It's dog as pitbull owners and advocacy groups square up in the debate over whether to ban the dogs as pets. Also squaring up today are civil society organizations over schools admissions and language policies. My guests, who today addressed Parliament over the issue, are at opposite ends of the debate.
Today, I have announced my team of MMCs who will guide their respective departments in a direction that builds on the great work we have achieved this far.
I mean, we saw glaring inequalities of responses to challenges of service delivery, where in suburban areas when there's an issue, within 48 hours there's a response, the mayor's on the ground.
We'll also look at the tiff between the DA and ActionSA in the city of Ekurhuleni and whether it could end up being a game changer. All that's coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. We begin here following ActionSA's announcement yesterday that it will no longer take up any mayoral committee positions in the DA-led coalition government in the Ekurhuleni Metro. The Democratic Alliance today came out guns blazing. In a scathing letter published today, the DA is accusing ActionSA of, among other things, self-interest, sabotage, and of sharing key strategic objectives with the ANC. Celia Brink, the DA's national spokesperson and author of the piece, joins us on the line. And also joining us is the leader of ActionSA in Gauteng, and that's Bongani Baloyi, whom you saw in that little clip we played there, talking about reasons they had to leave the coalition. They are both on the line to discuss this matter further. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks very much for your time. Celias, if I may start with you, a very unflattering presentation of what ActionSA is about from where you stand on the back, of course, of that decision that ActionSA announced yesterday.
Yeah, so Vuyo, the DA has a great deal invested in the success of these coalition governments, not just Ekurhuleni, but also Joburg and Tshwane. And quite frankly, so does the country, because they provide us with the most likely model of what a post-ANC national government would look like in 2024. So many people look to the DA to understand what's going on in these coalitions. There's a lot of hope invested in the success of these coalitions. And as the party that has the mayors, that is the largest in the coalitions, we often bear the weight of public expectation, and people want to know what's going on. One of the questions that we get asked consistently is, why does it seem that ActionSA regards the DA as a bigger threat to the country and to its own interests than the ANC? And why does ActionSA continuously attack the DA at every available opportunity? The latest example, as you referred to, of course, was the decision to withdraw from the Ekurhuleni multi-party coalition, right after Tanya Campbell was removed and then returned to that position with a bigger majority than initially. And so it would seem that ActionSA does not want a DA mayor in Ekurhuleni. It would seem that they wanted the EFF and the ANC to succeed in their attempt to form a voting bloc. And so we've got to ask, what is the strategic objective of ActionSA? And we've got to spot the trends. We don't want to get involved in a tit for tat about every attack that comes our way.
Okay.
But we do have a responsibility to analyze the trends And that is what the piece in Daily Maverick was about.
Bongani Baloyi, you spoke yesterday at that briefing. You did state the reasons why you feel you can no longer be in a coalition or occupy those positions, MMC positions in their government. We captured those in a few seconds, but I want to give you a minute to do that again. Tell us why you've decided to, take the decision you announced yesterday.
And thank you, Vuyo, and good evening to all of the viewers. Our position was communicated quite clearly yesterday why we preferred not to take up the executive seats in Ekurhuleni after we voted for Mayor Tanya Campbell. And I think that's a very important fact to state, because that fact directly contradicts what the DA spokesperson is suggesting about ActionSA, to suggest that we had a preference to have an ANC or EFF mayor. But it does not, it baffles me how that can be true when we voted for them. And another fact, just to put on the record, once a DA mayor or a multi-party mayor has been voted out of a coalition, it collapses the coalition. There's nothing there to coalesce around. And our position at that stage was very clear that the only obligations that we have after Mayor Tanya Campbell was voted out was towards the chief whip position and the speaker position, which the multi-party was still committed, including ourselves, to vote for those individuals who occupied those positions in council. And after voting for Mayor Tanya Campbell in this case, we committed to keep the ANC out, and that's what we did with our vote. And secondly, our caucus approached us to say they don't want to be part of this multi-party coalition for the following reasons. One, all of our strategic objectives that are included in this agreement that's signed in the multi-party coalition government have not been effected. At this point, as we still speak to you, the issue of insourcing has not moved. Number two, the issue of inner city regeneration has not moved. Number three, issues of service delivery in various areas, in particular in areas of the black areas, has worsened. And we found that from the portfolio that we held, being the safety portfolio and Metro Police, we were starting to be all over the place responding to these unrest that are happening because of genuine concern. And these, we found that is issues of water, basic service delivery, and that's putting more burden on that portfolio because the multi-party coalition is failing under those various indicators. So our position is quite clear. And when we as ActionSA make a decision, we are an independent party, we are committed to the multi-party coalition, we voted for them, and we prefer to sit outside to ensure that we can ensure that services is taken to the people who deserve services. I mean, there's residents in Ekurhuleni as we speak now who have not seen refuse removal for 2 months. There's residents who have not had water for more than 90 days. And it's outside of the rainwater problems that we're facing. That problem, in fact, started much sooner than the rainwater problem of water shedding in the province. Okay. So when we raised those issues, we understood exactly what we are doing. And for us, it's not a tit for tat. I mean, they can keep insulting us all they want and mischaracterize us, but we are committed to this agenda, but we will never be prescribed on how to do our business by the Democratic Alliance.
Celius, you've heard the reasons Bongani has just given us, and he believes the concerns that have been raised by even people outside of them are in fact genuine. What do you say to that?
So Bongani was very expressive of everything that is going wrong in Ekurhuleni. And of course we know there is a more than 2 decades of failure that this multi-party coalition government under Tanya Campbell is being called to fix. It's not going to be fixed in a few months. And what you do in government is you take responsibility for results. You take responsibility for fixing the things that are wrong. And if there are frustrations, you work through those frustrations. Now, what we haven't heard from Bongani was that the attempts by ActionSA, if there were any, have been frustrated by Mayor Tanya Campbell. They would presumably not have voted for her as the mayor if they believed that she was unsuitable to the position. So what we have here, I believe, is not just a shirking of responsibility, walking away from an agreement that was reached. It is also that ActionSA is positioning themselves to, in fact, benefit from the failures of coalition government. So they want to point to these things. They want to blame it on the DA. despite the fact that their MMCs have sat in those mayoral committees, and they want to benefit from it politically. And in that sense, they share a strategic objective with the ANC. And Vuyo, if it was limited to Ekurhuleni, we wouldn't be writing in Daily Maverick to summarize the situation. It's also about other instances, blocking the appointment of an exemplary apolitical civil servant, Johan Metler, as municipal manager in Joburg, sabotaging attempts by the mayor of Tshwane to lease the city's mothballed power stations to independent power producers. And so I can refer to many other examples, but the trend is to be that ActionSA doesn't accept co-responsibility of government. They, in fact, are invested in the failure and even in some instances the sabotage of the mayors of these multi-party coalitions. And what's important is that ActionSA reaches a point, and I don't know if it's internal wrangling, if Bongani disagrees with Herman Mashaba and Michael Beaumont about the direction of the party, but at some point, ActionSA must decide what they want to be. Do they want to help build a post-ANC South Africa, taking responsibility for the success of coalitions, or do they want to join the ANC on the opposition benches and pull down these DA mayors and multi-party coalition governments?
Bongani, you had the accusations. Well, one, you should take responsibility, having been part of the government whose failures you just pointed out. But secondly, I mean, you're only doing this because you want to politically benefit from it in the ways that Celia's just said or pointed out.
Well, that's not true. Let's first start with the Ekurhuleni situation. Well, we've raised our frustrations through to Mayor Tanya, and we're frustrated within the provisions of the coalition and multi-party in terms of the agreement that was signed. And we are frustrated. All of our efforts to ensure that there's insourcing of workers and security guards and cleaners has been frustrated. It has not moved to date. Instead, a report at point number 99 was sent just a day before council, which were not even had sight of, and we struggled to even access that report and to fight some of the recommendations in this report because a process was embarked upon which we're not even involved in, and we had to fight that to ensure that we get it stopped from going to council and with the recommendations that the DA had actually put on there. The second part, we also had to contest in a very difficult manner because the mayor in Ekurhuleni tried to do some illegal things, and one of the things she tried to do is change the macro structure of Ekurhuleni without any process at all, any study that looks at the institution and why these must be changed from one to the next. And she tried to write a letter to the municipal manager and later had to withdraw because of the pressure that would put on her. So inexperience and the pressure from the DA at the top is making it do all these wrong things. Now let's move to city of Johannesburg, where the allegation is made. We frustrated the process to appoint a suitable city manager. There's no question about the bona fides of Mr. Metler, who's a sterling public servant. But what came out during the appointment process is that the mayor had met this specific candidate outside of a process and only disclosed after the scoring had happened. Now, members of this panel were uncomfortable with this process, and this process was escalated through the provisions of the coalition agreement to where there was a legal opinion that was sought about this process. And the legal opinion actually confirmed our suspicion that what the mayor had done has created reasonable grounds for suspicion of the process and the creation that there was a predetermined objective. Now, this is what they will not tell you. The very same candidate we happen to support in City of Tshwane because the process was above board. So when we commit ourselves to a coalition, it does not mean that we'll be silenced. When there's wrongdoing, we'll say nothing just to keep the coalition intact. That's not the type of coalition we'll ever be part of. We will be the first to speak when there's a perception of wrong things happening. And we must not sugarcoat the Kratos deal in Tshwane because it's not as easy as it looks because what clearly happened there, and in the report that came out recently, confirmed that while this one item that the investigator looked at for the legal opinion, that item does not constitute the mayor's breach of the MFMA, but it does confirm that the mayor did the code of conduct of councillors and the delegation of council by venturing into a procurement space. And now recently in City of Johannesburg, the mayor wrote a letter to an acting city manager, giving him acting city manager instructions of who to appoint and how to appoint and that service provider to investigate an acting city manager who was also a member who applied for the city manager position. And that particular allegation, which then confirmed later that he was not guilty of a transgression, confirmed that, that there was no basis for excluding him. But that is quite clear that the DA ventures into issues of procurement. They withdraw these letters, but the same appointment was made following that very same instruction in a very bizarre type of way. So I think they must understand, the public of South Africa must understand that we're going to ensure that we are over and above advocating for clean governance. We're going to live it and show it. Whether it makes the DA uncomfortable, the residents must actually appreciate this because they can guarantee and have the support that we are going to ensure that we fight any of these malfeasance and corruption and ill behaviors that may transpire in this coalition. We're never going to be silent and be part of and complicit to these wrongdoings when the DA may does so. Now, I don't know how such can be misconstrued as frustrating and sabotaging that. Okay. The DA wants cozy lapdogs which don't raise sharply these issues of allegations, serious allegations of procurement and how public office bearers need to behave. Now, that's a standard we're going to hold everyone to.
Now, Silas, I mean, you've gone public in the manner that you have done. You've made the observations you articulated throughout this conversation. You've made up your minds about what you believe drives ActionSA. What does that mean? Does that mean now that you can no longer work together? There can never be a tonathering even?
So, Vuyo, to suggest that the piece written by the DA is somehow, an unprecedented attack on ActionSA would be a mischaracterization. I mean, we've had one attack after the other, press conferences being held by ActionSA. Every time Herman Mashaba gets near a television camera or a microphone, he tears into the DA. You never hear John Steenhuisen talking about Herman Mashaba or ActionSA. He's talking about cost of living crisis. He's talking about Tsele must go. He's talking about the issues. So the DA, unfortunately, we do have to respond to some of these attacks. At least we've got to place them in perspective, even if we can't and we don't want to respond to each and every accusation. I mean, Bongani referred to the Kratos matter in the city of Tshwane, and he has gone on record saying that referring to a corrupt contract. Now, I mean, that's been found to be completely untrue, for example. But that didn't stop Bongani from making that allegation. So, the DA wants to place this on record. We want to explain to people what's happening. We do see ActionSA's approach to these coalitions as a significant threat. We need to spot the trends, but we're not turning our back on these coalitions. We are not turning our back on what is still in place in Johannesburg and Tshwane. That includes ActionSA. But we do have to call the trends as we see them, and we do have to hold ActionSA to account for their conduct.
Bongani, for you, is this it? No looking back?
No, our position in Ekurhuleni is confirmed. It won't change. Our position in Tshwane, we support the multi-party. In Johannesburg, we support the multi-party. And these tensions are very healthy tensions, Vuyo. Our public must appreciate that these tensions is going to prevent wrong things from happening because somebody is going to speak. And this Kratos deal in Tshwane is not finished because there's a complaint submitted to the Speaker to investigate it from its inception and not just the one item of counsel, which is going to show a different picture, and we'll wait for the process to unfold. In the city of Ekurhuleni, the DA has to come to us on an issue-by-issue basis, and the issue for us centrally here is the service delivery to residents. So they need to clearly demonstrate how they're going to achieve this, and we're going to offer them the support. If there's no issue of how you resolve issues of refuse collection, and I mean, we fully appreciate that we're part of this government, we know its limitations, but we can also see that in terms of our own poll, that various people in Ekurhuleni feel that actually there's a regression of services in Ekurhuleni, and this we can't run away from.
Okay.
So when they need to come to us and talk to us, they must put squarely to us how they're going to deal with the issues of black areas and how they're going to ensure that their mayors responsive to issues there and not offering speedy responses to affluent areas only. Our people demand better, our people need better, and we're going to ensure that that's what we do. We're going to extract accountability from them. It's going to be a painful public process, but it's good for the body of our politics because we can't continue as if things are normal. Our people are struggling, and we're going to best represent them in these coalitions where we are. And these tensions are going to remain real, but they don't mean that we're not committed. We are very committed, and we're going to do our best to ensure that we extract accountability from DA mayors.
Okay, gentlemen, let me thank both of you for your time this evening. Bongan Baloyi, who is the DA's chairperson in the province of Gauteng, as well as Silas Brink, who is the national spokesperson of the Democratic Alliance. After the break, the debate over schools admissions and language policies once again coming alive today as civil society organizations addressed Parliament on the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. Many schools in predominantly white areas continue to use language and admission policies to deny learners access to their institutions. Well, that's the view of labor unions that today addressed Parliament on the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. Organizations like AfriForum, whose cultural affairs Alana Bailey joins us on the line, of course, beg to differ. But we are also joined for this conversation by Equal Education's parliamentary researcher, and that's Jane Bowman. Good evening to both of you. Thank you so much for your time. If I may start with you, Jane. I mean, this is a long-standing issue for which, around which this debate has continued to take place. What for you points to the assertion that both you and, of course, the unions made today that indeed this continues to be the case? In other words, there are schools, especially in predominantly white areas, that continue to use language and other admission policies to exclude, essentially.
Yes, we thank you so much for having me on. We, as an organization, organize in 5 different provinces across the country, and we have unfortunately seen that some schools continue to use language as a means to exclude other learners. You know, public schools are there to cater to the communities which they serve, and this must include all learners that live in the area, and therefore it is essential that we make sure that certain learners' rights to basic education, equality, and dignity aren't infringed by these racist and exclusionary practices.
You dispute that, Alana?
Yes, as you said, we definitely differ in opinion. Today, what was said by a lot of the people who made presentations is that the norms and standards of the existing Schools Act, as well as the Constitution, and numerous other pieces of legislation in the provinces and nationally, provide avenues through which such exclusion can be addressed. But we don't see that there are any such cases going on at the moment. So this is a vast generalization to say that children are being excluded on base of race just because of language. South Africa, in its constitution, recognizes the right of learners to be educated in their mother language, and we feel that this is a right that should be expanded to include all indigenous languages, instead of always making Afrikaans the scapegoat and forcing children to learn in a second or third language, namely English.
Do you believe, Jane, that these norms and standards that Alana is talking about are capable of being manipulated?
Well, I think one of the issues that we see is often the learners that fall victim to the situation, and I have to admit, this isn't something that is happening in half our public schools. We are talking about a certain set of public schools where this is happening. is that often the learners that are being excluded are vulnerable learners who don't have the resources to access schools further away from them, and therefore also often don't have the resources or information to understand how to challenge these issues. That's one of the reasons that we think it's really important that you have the MEC be involved, not just when something goes wrong, but at the start to prevent a learner who might, through this process of wanting to appeal and fight this, be out of school for 6 months, or whatever the case may be. We believe that it's important that, the state has a constitutional duty to ensure that learners have access to schools, and that this mustn't be something that just is an issue that when it crops up and when it becomes a problem, we then address it. We need to address it from the start.
Alana, I'm keen to know, what your, organization's viewpoint is to what, Jane just said, because, it is grossly unfair, probably, unconstitutional even, for children to be excluded because, of resource issues. In other words, because my child simply cannot afford to pay, therefore they must suffer.
What we heard today and what is the case in practice is that very often parents will go past 3, 4 or 5 English medium schools, go to an Afrikaans medium school simply because the quality of the education is very high there. And what the parents are not necessarily aware of, and what many organizations like to hide, is the fact that this quality is attached to the fact that it's a mother language school. Mother language provides the best education, and that has been proven nationally and internationally. So what we are seeing now is that parents are fed with a fallacy that if your child studies in English, then it is an automatic avenue to success. It's the language of aspiration, and therefore the only avenue open to a child, whether it's a vulnerable child or whether it's a child of more affluent parents, is that they must have access to English education. The same applies to an Afrikaans child. An Afrikaans child also has the right, in terms of the Constitution, to have access to mother language education. And there are many vulnerable Afrikaans-speaking children who are now being denied the right to have education in Afrikaans simply because their schools have been forced under pressure of the departments in the provinces to anglicize.
I'm keen to know what your view is on what Alana just said, Jane. Is that in fact, the truth? Is that what happens?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that are important to point out. I do definitely, agree that there are huge advantages of learning in a mother tongue language. That's undisputed. However, that isn't really the issue that is the crux of this. There's also in the Bill regulations or attempted amendments to allow for dual medium schools. The main point of this is not to stop certain learners from getting the best education that they deserve, but to make sure that all learners are able to get the best education they deserve. Public schools are public goods, and if a school is in a community where the demands and needs of that community are not matched by the language that school is teaching in, it isn't fair to simply keep that school in another language just to cater to a small group of children.
Alana just said that pupils or their parents would jump 3, 4 schools because they are going to the school they know that is known for good quality education. So it's not because there are shortages in the schools next to them. I don't know what your argument is to that.
Well, we have a different take. For one, we do know of examples in which the closest school and the best school for learners was a school in which they couldn't access due to language. But on top of that, this issue of well-resourced schools, like I said, public schools are public goods. it isn't good enough to say there is a less well-resourced school close by that has overcrowding, that struggles with teachers having issues of having to teach overcrowded classrooms. But a couple of kilometers away, there is a school that's under capacity that might be an Afrikaans language speaking school, but that the learner must just be satisfied with overcrowded classrooms, with a lack of access to resources, when there's a public school, which is a public good, that is not too far away from them, that would give them a much better education and could accommodate them, has the capacity to accommodate them. And that's why we are concerned that this language policy is being used to keep certain schools small, well-resourced schools, while other schools nearby are overcrowded, are under-resourced, and for those both to be public schools doesn't make sense. The reality is that public schools must serve the communities in which they are situated. And therefore, if a learner, one of the things we're calling for is that, when considering language policy, you must look at other well-located, well-resourced schools. It's not enough to tell a learner they should be satisfied with an overcrowded classroom when there is space and resources for them not too far away.
You can't argue, with that, Alana, or do you?
We do, because the examples that I referred to were cases where there were underutilized English medium schools in the vicinity. So we're not talking about certain schools being overcrowded and Afrikaans schools being empty. If we think, for example, of the high school in the Valdriehoek, there were 3 underutilized English medium schools who actually were scared that they were going to lose some of their teaching positions because they didn't have adequate children. While the Afrikaans school was filled to capacity, and yet the learners wanted to go to the Afrikaans school. Why? Because I think of the quality of education there. And as I say, the quality equals to the language policy. If it's a single medium Afrikaans school, it will definitely have a very high quality education. While if it's a dual medium school, then what mostly happens, and this is not what we thought up, this is what the UN's Minority Rights Special Rapporteur in his research says, then you will have a lot of social friction in a school, because it very seldomly happens that a school can provide equal study material and equal assessment in 2 languages at the same time. So what eventually happens is that such a dual medium school quickly, or a parallel medium school a little bit slower, will eventually revert to the dominant language, which in the case of South Africa is not any indigenous language, but always is English. So what you see is that you are definitely not protecting the rights to indigenous Afrikaans or any other language tuition if you revert to the dual medium or the parallel medium model.
Jane, why are we still talking about this in the manner that we've been talking about it for decades now? 28 years into democracy. Have we ever been able to put a finger on it?
I think that one thing that is really important to understand is that, a lot of the big concerns is that we are taking, there's too much power now going away from schools themselves and going to the state. Obviously, and I can't speak to the exact examples that Ms. Bailey referenced, and unfortunately, I'm not aware of exactly which schools those are. But we have unfortunately seen that some sections of the community that have more resources and have have more power, whether it's economic power or social power, to be able to sort of hoard their own resources and to be able to say, well, we have a good school for our children, and because our school works, we don't want to give up anything. We don't want to give that up. And the problem that we're sitting with is that we do have an education system that is in crisis. And so we understand, the impulse for communities and parents to want to safeguard their children's education. But, we're all in this together. These are public schools, and we need to make sure they work for everyone. Because we have seen 28 years or however many years after the end of apartheid, that communities have not always made the best decisions, school governing bodies have not always made the best decisions for the schools that they serve. It's for the communities they serve. It is now important that the HODs, the MECs step in and be able to make sure from the beginning that schools' policies match the communities that they are situated in.
Well, hopefully they will. Otherwise, people who have been given the responsibility by this nation to preside over, discuss, debate, and decide on this matter will indeed do what both the Constitution and the people of South Africa expect them to. Let me thank both of you for agreeing to come on. Alana Bailey is from Afri Forum, and of course Jane Bowman is from Equal Education. Both of them today addressed Parliament together with several other organizations, including teacher unions. Many of them still feel that predominantly white areas continue to use language and admission policies to deny learners access to their institution. It's an issue that obviously is not going to disappear anytime soon, given just how people are approaching it, I should say. To this now, a video that's been trending today as South Africans were debating on social media whether pit bulls should be kept as pets or not. But adding to that debate today was this video.
It's okay. Calm down. Get on the floor. You get some food? You want some food? Sit down.
The debate, of course, follows the gruesome death in Bloemfontein of 8-year-old Olebogeng Mosime over the weekend. So far, 49 pit bulls have been handed over to the SPCA in Bloemfontein. And here's the SPCA's Kashfi now.
When an animal is surrendered is that each animal is given an equal opportunity. What we do is we ensure that each animal is assessed by a qualified professional and a decision is made in the best interest of each individual animal after certain factors have been taken into consideration. And when it comes to the owner surrendering the animal, the SPCA is not there to judge anyone for why they can no longer look after the animals, why they don't want to keep their animals. Our doors are open to accept, to admit any animal at any hour of the day, any day of the year. That is our job. We're there to protect the animals. We're there to ensure that they don't suffer worse fates than being surrendered to the SPCA. And I think in this circumstance, Unati, given why those pit bulls were surrendered, it's just another clear example. And I want to be clear on this. We're not saying the SPCA will never turn away an animal ever at any point. But it's another clear indication that the SPCA is now left to clean up the mess, to deal with the disaster, to deal with the repercussions of bad decisions made by other people.
Kashfi Naya speaking on our sister program a little earlier in the day, but was talking, of course, specifically to the calls that have been made and the responses that have been received so far in Bloemfontein after that unfortunate death of 8-year-old Olebogeng Mosime. Should they be banned or not as pets? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Sizwe Kupelo from the Sizwe Kupelo Foundation. I'm also joined by Linz Rautenbach, who is from the Pitbull Federation of South Africa. Good evening to both of you. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to start with you, Sizwe, because I know that your organization has been running a campaign, collecting signatures from South Africans calling for the banning of pit bulls from people from being allowed to make, pit bulls or keep pit bulls as domestic pets.
Thank you, good Vuyo, and good evening to the listeners and my fellow guests. Yes, our stance has not changed. We want the government to impose a ban on this killer dog. Because the dog has proved itself to be very dangerous, we want it removed from the society. It has done a lot of damage. Our children do not feel safe on the streets. They can't go to the parks to play freely. The neighbors are now threatened by the dog. This is why we need it out of the community. We have returned to government. We've made proposals, first being the total ban of the pit bull, but we also want all power breeds to be regulated. People will be required to have licenses and also be required to undergo basic training before they can keep those dogs. As a foundation that's looking after the interests of vulnerable children, we entered into this because we realized that children were dying as a result of this dog. So we are about the right to life, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, nothing else. We are very happy that we have now received 75 signatures from South Africans
75.
who have supported us. 75,000 signatures, and there are a number of pit bull victims who were lucky to survive, who are now telling their stories.
Okay.
But very wounded psychologically and physically. Some of them have lost their arms. We are going to take all that to substantiate our call when we go to Pretoria.
Okay.
We are now in interaction with the Office of the Minister because we are ready to deliver the petition. We just need a date from the Office of the Honorable Minister.
Okay. Linz Rattenbach, what is your federation's view on the banning?
We do need to echo Dr. Kupelo's call to end the maulings. There is absolutely no excuse for any child or any person to be torn apart by a dog, and especially not in their own garden or in a park or in the street. However, although many countries have brought breed bans in, we just need to look at the countries where these dogs are banned. The UK, Australia, and in some states in America, where maulings are actually on the increase. The literature is there to prove that breed bans don't work. However, there does need to be accountability and there does need to be regulations. These dogs are not for everybody, and this is evident in the amount of attacks that are happening. It is evident in the number of animals that are being attacked. But we need to look at this and go, our government can barely enforce the laws we currently have with other things. How are they going to enforce a breed ban? How are they going to prove a dog is a pit bull? But we do have a law in existence, a 30-year-old law that has never been enforced, the Animals Matters Amendment Act. Now, this is an extension of the Animals Protection Act, and this act makes clear what you face when your dog mauls or kills somebody, which is prison time. The problem is, up until recently, and actually even now, nobody actually knows whose job it is to really enforce this act. You've got the SAPS who are saying it's them and the SPCA, but mostly the SPCA because it's part of the Animals Protection Act. Then you have the SPCA saying that it's the SAPS, but this doesn't help the victim. These children suffer the most horrific damage. However, to go and ban a breed, all you're going to do is you're going to see sort of let's use lockdown, for instance. Government banned cigarettes. It didn't curb people smoking. They banned alcohol. It didn't curb people drinking. In fact, people found creative ways to do it. Same with banning any breed. And also what you're going to find is people that own these dogs, especially in a country where they feel failed by the justice system, they're going to move on to the next breed. And that could actually prove to be even worse, because you're going to see now not only an increase in pit bull maulings because it's going to now be underground and unregulated. Now those who can't get their hands on a pit bull are going to go and get their hands on another breed. And so we're going to see an increase in maulings. We need to see criminal charges.
Okay, a couple of things. I mean, Linz, is crime and protecting oneself for one's family the one and only reason people keep these dogs? And if so, are there no other sort of less dangerous dogs to do pretty much the same jobs?
Pit bulls are owned for various reasons. You get good owners who manage them and control them, and then you get them owned for wrong reasons. One of those wrong reasons is the criminal element of dog fighting, where these dogs are owned and bred for fighting, and often you'll find poorly bred dogs and these, and especially your lower level dog fighters use them as security as well. Then you've got people who want them as protection. Now, a good and a well-bred pit bull is not human aggressive and shouldn't be human aggressive. But because they've been mass-bred and people have often promoted dogs with poor temperaments as ideal security dogs, these dogs have actually just taken off. So yes, security is one reason, even though the pit bull should never be owned for security reasons. Another problem is the well-meaning pit bull owner who refuses point blank to accept what they own. And they actually embarrass those of us who own these dogs and are enthusiasts, because you'll see a mauling happening. And I saw it this week, and we actually put a statement out to ask people to stop doing it. A child is killed and mauled. The first thing these people do is head all over the post, and they post photos of their dogs and scream down how the child must have done something because their beloved pit bull would never do it. No child whatsoever deserves to be mauled. So it's wrong ownership, and it's owners who are not regulated. It's people who shouldn't own power breeds, or actually, to be very honest, most people shouldn't own any dogs. It's not a very popular opinion, but a power breed dog, especially a pit bull, is not the average pet for the average dog owner, and they come with a lot of responsibility. And to be very honest, the bulk of the owners who own these dogs don't want to accept this responsibility. We are not angry with Dr. Kupelo and his foundation for this petition. In fact, when we had our meeting with him, we thanked him because for the first time, we finally have awareness for victims. For the first time, it's been spoken about. For the first time, the pit bull lobby machine and every advocate who thinks they know better is being silenced and being told to sit down, and the victims are finally having a voice. And if you're a true pit bull enthusiast, you're not going to be angry about this. You're going to be grateful because it's opened the door for communication. It's opened the door to find a solution that benefits not only the victim, which is, for me personally, human life trumps everything else, but it offers a solution for our dogs, to get our dogs out of the hands of people who are using them as weapons. I mean, for me, it's absolutely shocking that somebody can walk out and shoot a child and it is in the media and that person's arrested immediately, they're criminally charged, it's murder, and we go wild. Yet a dog can escape its property, maim and kill a child in his yard, and the child is blamed. What did the child do? How did we get to this in society? It's not acceptable.
Sizwe Kupelo, the very same people you're waiting for a date from are the ones who are not doing their job.
But the dog is very dangerous. It is bloodthirsty. We want it removed from society. We are very clear about that. People are dying, particularly children. The debate that we are having is very unfortunate because we have a little innocent life that has been lost. A tiny body is sleeping somewhere in a mortuary. We don't want any other death. We don't know what would happen tomorrow morning or a day later. The reality is that a monster dog is amongst the people. People cannot walk freely. This dog is killing people. It has been killing people. This is not an isolated incident. There are a number of attacks that are associated with this particular breed. Let us not justify it. Let us do the right thing for South Africa. Let us admit that we have a problem, and government has to step in and put a stop to what is happening. So we're very clear. Let us not justify. The dog is dangerous. It is killing its own owners. It is killing neighbors. It is killing strangers. Numbers do not lie. One does not need to be a rocket scientist to realize that we have a problem, and we need to put a stop to the problem. Let's not justify an animal. Okay. Whether it's in the wrong hands or good hands, but people are losing lives. Let's do something about that.
Cesar Kupelo, Linz Rattenbach, let me thank both of you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's our show for tonight. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.